So this afternoon we'll look at many different aspects of the pre-purchase building inspections. What happens during an inspection, the defects that are looked for and hopefully found, what's fixable and at what cost, and when to walk away from purchasing a property. We'll also consider inspections in terms of the asset type, be it a house or an apartment, and then we'll get to some questions at the end. So before I start quizzing Pete about all this, I think it's worth sharing with you what you told us about your inspections when you registered. So first off, all of those who have purchased a property, of those who have, 74% have obtained a pre-purchase building inspection. And of those who have obtained an inspection, 35% have walked away from a property, presumably because of that inspection. Which brings us to your greatest fears. High remedial costs associated by termites, termites being one of the major concerns, and structural works, as well as hidden problems that may not be quite so obvious. All right, so Pete, there's plenty to absorb there. Can you start by giving us a bit of a rundown to our webinar attendees as to the overview of an inspection process?
Well, basically a pre-purchase building inspection in simple terms is a visual assessment of a dwelling, a property, whether it be a Class 2 dwelling, a flat unit, or a Class 1, a house, to identify any major defects, minor defects, and safety hazards in all accessible areas. So really at the end of it, what we want to be able to tell our clients is what's major at this property that needs to be fixed straight away, and what's there that can be fixed down the track, and what sort of costs are they looking at. That way they're in everyone's in an informed position to make the right decision. That's the basis of it.
Very good. Okay, so briefly, what are the key defects a building inspector is looking for?
Well, we're looking for all defects. We have to report on all defects, all visible defects. You're looking for structural issues like footings issues, major structural cracking. Some cracks are minor, some are major, depending on where they are and what sort of the widths of those cracking. We're looking for damp issues, hidden damp issues using moisture meters, thermal imaging cameras. The biggest one and the most problematic one for us is termites, trying to find termites because they're so hard to find. And bathroom leak issues, like water issues, leak issues is a common problem in all houses, and that contributes later on to further problems. So those are issues that need to be rectified.
It can attract the termites too, can't it?
Any termites like water and timber, that's what they like. And if you've got a leak from a shower base that's been used daily, that's where we're always finding termites.
Okay, so I guess the devil's in the detail. So let's have a look firstly at roofs and foundations.
Well, roofs, we look at basically a roof from the top to the bottom. A tiled roof normally has issues such as even minor issues like moss build-up and cracked ends on tiles. It's quite common. The biggest issue, I suppose, is unevenness in a roof line, which can be indicative of further problems. It can be as simple as someone's cut something in the roof to add storage, so then they've taken away load-bearing components. Metal roofs, obviously looking for rust and sheet lift, because a metal roof, to replace a metal roof, you're looking at a substantial cost nowadays. A tiled roof, you're not looking at such a big cost because you probably just get a roof restoration, which you end up with a brand new roof. But they're the things we look at from a roof perspective. In relation to our footings, foundations, we're obviously looking at cracking in walls, we're looking at drainage issues, we're looking at large trees growing near walls because tree roots will cause problems. We're looking at plumbness of walls, how straight they are, which is indicative of some footings, foundations movement. With cracking, that is a great concern of everybody's. We get many phone calls from people who ring up and say, look, we've got some cracking, we're really worried that the house is going to fall down, which most of the case it's not right. Cracks are basically put into categories from category 0, which are hairline cracks, to less than 1 mil cracks to 5 mil cracks to 5 mil and greater. Now, these really depends on where these cracks are as to whether it's a major structural issue. But when you're looking at 5 to 15 mil cracks, you're really at the stage where you need an engineer to have a look at it. The rest, any category 2 cracking, which is less than 5 mil cracks, either internally or externally, should basically just be monitored for 12 months. And if it gets worse, well, then you're going to have to do something about it. In relation to internal walls, like I said, that's exactly the same with your cracking. Lath plaster, very common in older houses, see it all the time. I love it. It's a great insulator. It does crack. They do say after about 80 years you should replace it. But if you don't mind patching it, I would do it. I wouldn't replace it unless it's got really bad. Another sort of cracking, especially internally, which is an indicator of a footings foundations issue, is diagonal cracking, especially above openings, above doors and windows. Very typical of some stump issues.
Okay, so moving on to some damp issues.
Yeah, well, dampness is probably a big issue in a lot of the older homes, especially rising damp, and rising damp only occurs in masonry. You're not going to get it at a weatherboard unless it's a chimney, which we do see a fair bit, but which is relatively cheap to rectify. But rising damp is basically a breach of the damp-proof course, which lays horizontally in the bed, in the mortar bed, below floor level. And once you're getting damp inside above floor level, it's a rising damp problem. But it's very difficult to tell when some people have painted up. They've recently painted their walls and hidden it, but anything solid brick, we definitely run a moisture meter on it because we will pick it up. As you know, Jarrod, we pick it up all the time. But it's got to be. It's not. Sometimes it's not related to the damp-proof course. It can be excessive damp underneath the house, condensation issues coming up the wall. It's got to be diagnosed properly, and the specialists use probes, which unfortunately we can't use probes on a non-invasive pre-purchase inspection.
We've had, I know, a few recently where it's not always rising either, is it? It can be coming from water leaks in the roof space, which can get cavity bricks and things like that. So
yeah, well, there's different types. You've got rising damp, falling damp, horizontal damp. People can build up, which is a no-no in my eyes, a garden bed up against a wall. Come up, 300, 600 mil of the garden bed. You're going above the floor level. All you're doing is adding damp to the brickwork, and mortar takes damp, so it will penetrate.
Ventilation is such a key part to keeping it away, and when you do build up close to walls or over ventilation points around, I guess it's restricting all of that, and that airflow, like you mentioned before.
You need a good cross flow of air in any subfloor, especially a masonry home. Weatherboards normally already have it with just the plinth boards, but your symptoms when you're looking at rising damp, you've got to be looking at one, salt residue on the lower walls, which has gone above floor level. Okay, so it's breached the damp-proof course. Your paint flake on your lower walls, brick fretting, and mortar decay. And we do see it a lot in older houses. Sometimes it can be a leak from a shower. You'll see all the salt on the lower double brick wall inside, and it's normally from a shower leak if there's bathrooms in the area.
I know damp's one of our major concerns when we're looking at particularly older style single front cottages, that sort of thing. But it also, I guess, leads to, as we said earlier, the next major issue is termites, and as we said before, termites are attracted by damp and timber obviously as well. So I'll leave this one to you, Pete.
Yeah, well, termites in Australia, you've got a lot of companies saying 1 in 3 houses gets termites, and I think it's even a report put out by the CSIRO. I think they're taking into consideration a lot of the northern states because in Victoria, I would say 1 in 8 houses that we look at, which is still poor odds, will have live termites or past termite damage. And finding termites is the hardest part. You really need access underneath the house because that's where they come from. They're subterranean, they start at the ground, you have to get under. And unfortunately, a lot of these houses we get to, you can't get under, especially the inner suburbs, double brick terrace houses. There's just no access. So there's a lot of work involved in trying to find them. You have to do a lot of timber testing, timber tapping, moisture readings. We have if we come across something suspicious, we have what's called a Termitrack meter, which is basically a radar, which you put up against the wall, and then you've got a PDF or your iPad, and it shows movement of termites behind the wall. Right. It tells you whether they're live or not. But yeah, termites is our riskiest and scariest part of any inspection. A lot of people say brick homes on a slab don't get termites. Well, they're wrong. They're very wrong. We did one about 3 months ago in Frankston, brick veneer on a slab, termites found at the front window frames, back window frames. By the time they pulled it all apart, the insurance company, $148,000 worth of work. So, look, they are a problem. Some areas they're more of a problem.
Yep.
You know, anywhere where there's gum trees, parkland, and all along the beach through to Frankston. People say if you can't find termites in Frankston, you're not looking hard enough, which is probably right, because look, we do find a lot down that way. But look, 1 in 8 houses, like I said, the risk is still there. I think anyone that doesn't get the termite specs I'd get one before a building inspection.
Yeah, okay.
I would personally. Now, when it comes to preventing termites, well, the inspection reports, the termite inspection reports will basically let you know of all the conducive conditions around a house that attract termites, and that is wood and water. So any timber, a lot of people have their firewood sitting on the ground up against the house. That's a no-no. They have timber, debris and offcuts and all that under the house. Definite no-no. Every time we flip a piece of timber under a house, we've normally found termite damage. Dampness, of course. Your hot water unit overflow dripping away. We commonly find termites near a hot water overflow that's just dripping. Even your old wall-mounted air conditioners that are dripping.
Yep.
There's a water source for termites. You'll find them around there. I think at the end of the day, you can get a chemical treatment, what's called a chemical barrier by a pest control company. They do offer guarantees on that. It can be a spray underneath the house, or if it's a slab around the perimeter of the house. But the bottom line with that, it's not going to work if you say you've got poor drainage. If you've got a downpipe that's not connected up, pouring down the side of a wall, all that's going to do is like cordial. It's going to dilute the chemical.
Yep.
So everything's got to be right before you even bother spending $3,000 on a chemical treatment. So that's about what they cost now.
Very good. Now, I guess one of the things that you said that could attract termites is leaks, and bathrooms can very much be a source of that.
Well, bathrooms, especially in our older houses, bathrooms, we're always coming across leaks. Again, difficult to find. We use a moisture meter on the back walls of showers and things like that, trying to find out if they're leaking. Leaking shower recesses and even balconies for that matter due to inadequate waterproofing is one of the biggest complaints that the Victorian Building Authority, the previous Building Commission, gets on a regular basis because it's never done right. Now the Building Authority are in the process now of having builders issue certificates that that's been done, like electricians have to issue their certificates of compliance. So yeah, we do find issues with that, more in the older houses, not so much the newer houses. And the other sorts of leaks you find in bathrooms are normally just old tapware or the trap's leaking or something like that. But in a bathroom, especially a shower recess, it's got to be checked. Cracked tiles, drummy tiles, can be expensive.
Okay.
Once you start replacing them.
All right. So a common question that we do often get asked is, should I get a building inspection done on an apartment? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I would, and I'm not saying that because I'm in this business, but the apartment itself is going to be like looking at a house. It's going to be your minor defects and things that are all in your standard pre-purchase building inspection report for a house. But with apartments, under the scope or the Australian standard for apartments, all we're supposed to look at is the apartment itself and the immediate walls of that apartment. Yep. That's the requirement. I think it's a better idea to, one, do the apartment for your normal defects, but also, if you can, is have a good look around the block, because we come across a lot of old apartments, especially look around Elwood, that have some substantial cracking, and ultimately you'll be paying for it. Even if it's got nothing to do with your apartment, it's causing no problems with your apartment, you'll be paying for it.
Elwood's always, we find that as it's a great suburb, but it's a very interesting suburb, being built on a former swamp, and most of the development occurring post sort of 1920s, 1930s. There's quite often a lot of underpinning issues and things if you're buying in the wrong areas down that high.
Yeah, well, some areas of Elwood, we come across, you'll see a lot of differential settlement issues in footings, foundations, and that's obvious by cracking and things like that. But it's not every area of Elwood, don't get me wrong, but there are certain areas of Elwood that have some issues with movement. Yep.
Very good. Okay, so now we're getting to the pointy end of the discussion. What is fixable and what will it cost? And is that something that you can discuss with clients?
Well, with the Australian standards, we're not to put in costs of repairs, and we're also dictated obviously by our insurance company. They tell us we can't do it, and there are reasons for that, because the costs can blow out. One plumber might charge 45 an hour, the other one might charge 95 and charge out his apprentice as well.
Yeah.
And then it's going to depend, like, so let's say you want to do a bathroom, your bathroom needs your shower recess needs to be done, and people will say, well, what's it going to cost me? Well, that's really going to depend on the quality of your fittings.
Correct.
So, you can get a full bathroom now for 10 grand up to 50, 60 grand. Just depends on where you want to go. So, like, everything's fixable, but we can give you an estimate of what we think it's going to cost between these prices. I know of a building inspector that gave a price for to put in a bathroom, and gave an estimate cost to put in a bathroom under some steps, some stairs, within a house, under the staircase. And he said, oh, look, it'll cost about 10 grand. He forgot that it was on a slab, so you've got to cut all the sewer in and connect it under the slab to the sewer. It turned out to be 40-something thousand, and he had to foot the rest of the bill.
Right.
Yeah. So no, we don't. I'm happy to verbally give anyone what I think. Like, I could tell you a new gutter system on a standard 3-bedroom home would be about 3 grand, 2 to 3 grand. What downpipes would cost you, what a roof restoration, re-stumping would cost you. That's easy. Yeah,
that's good. Okay, so I guess the next point is, when do we walk away from in terms of costs? And I guess from my perspective here, it really does depend to a certain extent on what the purpose of the purchase is. What you might be prepared to put up with if you're buying an investment property could be very different to what you'd be prepared to put up with if it's a home that you've been searching for 2 years before you've actually found what you wanted. So what are the sort of things that you would probably start to suggest to clients? Perhaps it's getting a bit difficult here. I'd walk away from this one.
Yeah, I don't like to tell people to walk away, because look, it's really going to depend on their financial, where they're at, and what they want to do with the property. But look, I have been known to tell people to walk, and one of the main things I would tell people to walk on would be a substantial termite infestation that you would find in a house. Even if it wasn't live termites, if you found a lot of termite damage under a house, because the simple reason is we can't walk into these pre-purchase house inspections and start pulling people's walls apart to see if the studs and the bottom plates and top plates are all being damaged. So there is just so much risk that, like I said with the Frankston house, it could end up costing you an absolute fortune. I would certainly walk from something like that, personally.
Yeah, no, and that's fair enough. Okay, thanks, Pete. So we're about to go through your questions. I just need to reiterate, I guess, the key points to talk to that we've discussed in today's presentation. So, building inspections should be very thorough, and it should be a very detailed process all the way through. You always must use a qualified building inspector. And generally, I guess, with a house, we would definitely suggest that a building inspection needs to be done, and often with apartments too, but it's probably more on a case-by-case basis. Use this process as part of your decision making. So whether to walk away depends on, I guess, how much work is required and how extensive that will be, and as Pete said, depending on what your budget allows for, and whether that is worth fixing in terms of what's the likely return of carrying out those works, perhaps. Okay, so that does end at the formal part of the presentation for today. We'd now like to turn to some questions as part of, as we mentioned at the start. Thank you very much, as we said, to those who have taken the time to send us through those questions at registration. All right, so let's have a look at the first one. Thank you very much, Gail, for sending this through. Pete, how can you tell whether the building inspector is listing remote possibilities to cover his back as opposed to serious questions? Now, we've had a few others that are along those sorts of lines from Sharon, Scott, Paul and Steve as well.
Well, with the word possibilities, I suppose a building inspector can list possibilities. For example, let's say I can't get under a house and I find uneven floors, but I can see through the vents that it's old red gum timber stumps. I've got an uneven floor. It's quite okay for me to put in that report potentially stumps re-stumping is required in certain areas, we would have to get underneath and check every single stump. We're bound by, obviously, the Australian standards, 4349.1 and 3 in relation to both these inspections. And what we have to report on is, I think I stated before, your structural, your major, which includes structural, your safety hazards, which is like anything in a state of collapse, and and an overall general opinion of your minor maintenance defects. So they're the things that we have to report on.
Okay. Next one. This one's from Pam. How are home built buyers to justify spending hundreds of dollars on each property inspection when they may be interested in many properties before it? I guess, just as a starting point, we look at this, we quite often have building inspections that we would, as a result of them, we would walk away from. And I almost look at it as a semi-insurance policy. Just instead of looking at, well, I've had to spend hundreds of dollars on each inspection, I've actually saved myself hundreds of thousands of dollars in costs of what I may have had to do had I gone through with buying this property. Is that?
Yeah, look, I think the justification of it is in the potential risk. It's a huge risk not to, but look, a lot of people don't decide to do it, and you can be lucky. Look, most houses we come across have got issues. Now, whether they're major issues, structural issues, or termite issues, or just minor issues. A lot of houses we rate around average. There's very rarely do we rate a house above average compared with a house of similar construction, similar age. It's got to be a house that's been fastidiously maintained to get that sort of a rating. So, look, there's always that element of risk that you may just come across a house and without getting inspection where you'll have something major, but you might be lucky.
Yeah.
It just depends. We had a buyer in Wheelers Hill about probably three weeks ago. Bought the house at auction, didn't get it inspected. He was the only bidder, and he got a bit concerned once he bought it, and then we ended up inspecting it for him as the buyer. It's a two-storey house, and we had termites from the top to the bottom. That's not common. Don't get me wrong. That's not every house, but he's just very, very, very unlucky. Very unlucky.
Okay, next one. Are vendors obliged to advise of recent termite treatment on a property that they are selling?
Is that from Marita?
Yes, from Marita.
Yeah, Marita. Well, I'm not a lawyer, but as far as I know, the vendor doesn't have to tell you anything. It's basically buyer beware. Certain things with termite treatments that you should have a look at when you're having a look at a house. Open up the meter box. It will have a sticker in there if it's been treated. It has to be done. If you've got drill holes in concrete paving around the wall of the home in the pathways, about 150 mil apart, that's a really good indicator that the property has had termites and they've treated it. But no, the vendor, like if I was selling my house, I don't think I'd be telling too many people that it was riddled with termites, and I don't think there would be many people that would.
No.
Unfortunately.
Okay, next one. Olivia, thank you very much. How does the inspection for an apartment differ from a whole strata building inspection?
Well, with the Australian standards, an apartment or a strata inspection is limited to basically that apartment alone, and like I said, the immediate exterior. Normally, none of the other areas, like the common areas, have to be inspected. Like I said, we do check, try to check as much as we can around the external block or the entire block for any substantial cracking. But it's important that you get the strata records to try and find out if there's anything that they are contemplating doing. Really important.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Okay, question 5 from Ravi. A building is still under statutory warranty period, but the builder argues that the brickwork cracks are not defects. What can I do?
Ring me, Ravi. I'll have a chat to you about that. It really depends on the size of the cracks and where the cracks are and possible causes. When you're looking at hairline 1 mil cracks, the builder isn't responsible for those. It's basically common shrinkage and expansion they put that down to. But when you've got your category 2 cracks, which are less than 5 mil, you've got to monitor that for 12 months, and at the end of that monitoring period, if the crack is still a Category 2 crack or above, the builder has to come back and rectify it. Now this is all found in the Guide to Standards and Tolerances 2015, which you can have a read of and download off the internet. But yeah, there's certain things they do have to fix, certain things they don't. If you're responsible for it, which sometimes they try and make out, like let's say you put up paving that sloped towards the house instead of away from the house as per the requirements of this relevant standard, he can turn around and say, well, that paving drains towards the house, therefore water's getting down into the footing, and that's what's causing that cracking, and you put that paving there, I didn't, so therefore it's your fault. So there's certain things that have to be looked at. Give me a ring and I'll talk you through it.
Great, thanks Pete. Okay, from Ian, should a survey of property boundaries occur as part of the pre-purchase inspection?
Look, boundaries will be out. We can measure the width by the depth for you, but that won't necessarily mean that the fences are in the correct position. To get that done, you have to have that done by a land surveyor. It's basically called a boundary re-establishment. Now they can cost anywhere from $1,500 up to $2,500 to get one of those done. The bottom line, if you have that done, what you're going to find is, one, you've stolen some of your neighbour's land, or two, they've stolen some of yours. Very rarely is it out by, over a square metre. There is a tolerance of where the boundaries can be. It's not much. I think it's from memory around 50 mil out. But look, it is worthwhile. If you've got concerns, it is worthwhile getting done, but I don't think it's necessary to get it done straight away before.
Okay. Question 7 from Damien. How serious are blocked wastewater drains?
Well, wastewater is sewage. Obviously, he's talking about sewage. So one thing you don't want is sewage issues. Obviously, for health reasons. Reasonably easy to fix, Damien. Normally, you just get a plumber in. He'll find your inspection opening, run his cable down it, and unblock it. Now, sometimes it can be a blockage your end in your block. Sometimes it can be a blockage out on the street, which then becomes a water authority issue. But the plumber will tell you that you need to call the plumber. They charge about $165 just to arrive.
Yeah, good. Question 8. How can a realistic assessment be made of foundation integrity?
Well, we can look at a house and say it's 40 years old and everything's straight and everything's level, and say, it's a fair possibility that that foundation is fine. We can look at a house that old or newer with uneven footings and substantial cracking, and we could say there are issues with footings and foundations. It's a visual inspection. Lois?
Okay. Very good. Question 9. Hey, this doesn't look well on for you, Pete.
Will there be a price drop in Sydney and Melbourne?
Maybe I'll take this one.
In Sydney.
You think there will be in Sydney? Okay.
I've got no idea. That's your job.
We're obviously Melbourne focused. Sydney's got a lot of good underlying drivers for capital growth, particularly within the inner city suburbs there. Melbourne itself, there's certainly still been good performance this year, and we'd expect that to continue. I'm not expecting it to be over the top in terms of high levels of growth over the coming 12 months to 24 months, but there's still certainly good underlying drivers to continue the performance. Certain sectors of the market are performing better than others. Certainly single-fronted cottages, houses within about a 10 to 12k radius of the city. There's very strong demand for that type of property at the moment. And older style apartments, there's reasonable levels, but it's probably softened a little bit in the last 6 to 12 months. So some good opportunities around from savvy buyers. So thanks very much, Pete.
No, thank you very much, Jarrod. I hope I helped some of your listeners.
Very good. Thank you.